Okay.
So we can start, right?
Yes.
So good morning, everyone. Welcome to the International Panel. It's a huge pleasure to be joined today by a group of thinkers whose work approaches truth, politics, University of Ljubljana. He is working on Hegelianism and its relation to the notion of appearance. He previously studied politics and continental philosophy at the University of Warwick. Gregor Moder is a senior research associate at the Department of Philosophy, University of Ljubljana. His work focuses on Hegelian dialectics, political philosophy, and theater studies. Lea Picard is a postdoc researcher at Södertörn University, Stockholm, and research assistant at the Department of Philosophy, Ljubljana. Joining us online, well, you cannot see them right now, Mihaela Mihai is a political theorist at the University of Edinburgh. Her research focuses on political emotions, memory, and complicity in injustice, bridging political theory, ethics, and cultural studies. Finally, Camilo Morán of the University of EUTOPIA, Barcelona, is a political philosopher whose research explores critical theory, contemporary political thought, populism, and religious studies. As moderator and the first speaker, let me sketch briefly the frame of our discussions and the questions we hope to pursue together. We propose to approach post-truth along two main axes. First, as a diagnosis of history, the sense that we live in an era in which truth and its conditions of possibility have seemingly vanished. To each their own truth. This is the logic of relativization that leads to what might be described as a time of lies. Second, as a theory of politics, post-truth became a prominent notion after 2016, strongly associated with Donald Trump and the style of new authoritarianism, for which he stands as emblem. Here, fake news and post-truth appear together, designating new forms in which political power is obtained, mobilized, and executed. In this light, we may ask, are we now subjected to the power of lies? Our aim today is to reflect on this conjunction between historical diagnosis and political power. Is post-truth really an accurate name for our present? And if so, what does it illuminate about recent political phenomena? This main question will guide our debate, and from it, we can unfold several secondary lines of inquiry. Can truth ever be separated from its appearance? Was there ever an epoch truly in truth compared to ours, which is supposedly beyond it? Can political power be disentangled from its theatrical dimensions? Does post-truth help us understand authoritarianism, or does it rather the obscene logic of power that lays everything there? We might also ask, what are the concrete forms through which post-truth manifests itself? From climate change denial to pseudoscience, from alternative medicine to conspiratorial thinking, which of these can be seen as its most distinctive expression? And is conspiracy perhaps the central mode of thought of our era? Another crucial dimension concerns causes, disinformation campaigns, the demise of scientific authority, the rise of social media, hybrid warfare, or the longer shadow of neoliberalism. Did neoliberalism pave the way for post-truth politics? And has post-truth now outlived it? Or are they coextensive phenomena? Finally, we may wonder whether post-truth has a political color. It is inherently right-wing, or does it come across ideological divides? How does it relate to the Enlightenment's legacy and to postmodernity? Can figures such as Donald Trump or Kalin Georgescu be thought of paradoxically as postmodern characters? At the same time, we should remember that concerns about truth and lies in politics are not new. Plato already worried about sophistry as the corruption of civic dialogue. Machiavelli openly theorized the strategic use of deceit in maintaining power. Hannah Arendt, writing in the aftermath of the Second World War, diagnosed the fragility of facts under conditions of mass propaganda. What distinguishes our moment, perhaps, is that the erosion of truth has become not only a tool of power, but a cultural condition that permeates everyday life. We no longer encounter propaganda only in totalitarian regimes, but across the whole spectrum of digital interaction, from Facebook feeds, Instagram reels, or WhatsApp groups. This raises the question: is post-truth a political pathology, or rather the symptom of a deeper cultural transformation in how we experience reality in itself? With these questions in mind, I am delighted to open our session. We will begin with Ganda Dashar, followed by Pedro Moder and Lea Puha, here with us in person, and then Michaela Mihai. And then the people. And then Michaela Mihai, Camille Inguranu, who will join us online. Then, when all the presentations are finished, we will open the discussion to you, to the public. I look forward to the dialogue that will unfold between these perspectives and to engaging with you in what promises to be a rich and timely discussion. So then, you're the first. Let's give the microphone. That's the least of later. See, that's how we do it in online, right? But I'm prepared for something. Okay, so this is the first time I'm actually reading from a paper. So if I'm getting around the official track in this today, I'll try not to do that, but most probably I'll do it because I already started doing it. So we'll see how I do that. So I must first begin by emphasizing that post-truth is a concept which emerged around the time of Donald Trump's first election and the Brexit vote, so around 2016. And it entrenched itself as a mainstream popular discourse after the COVID pandemic, which was a catalyzing factor for the explosion of conspiracy thinking, anti-scientific sentiment, and the legitimization of a new form of authoritarianism, with its origins in the Trumpian, now we know it as a Trumpian propaganda. It's all over, right? You cannot escape Trump. Therefore, post-truth is normally asserted as a way of identifying a certain type of right thought, so it has a political power. The main thesis of the post-truth diagnosis consists in the view that we find ourselves in a world that's a history of which is precisely beyond facts and common sense reasoning, in which the right for free speech is perversely invoked in order to assert the power of rumor, deception, falsity, and lies. As the diagnosis goes, inasmuch as everyone has their own truth, there exists no more a common ground to assert truthfulness in its universal form, namely as a way to certify a certain set of commonly shared facts about the world. That there is such a thing as climate change, that there are such entities as viruses, that there are such phenomena as wars happening across the border, or that water is indeed basic water. With all that, whatever.
Post-truth is therefore, first and foremost, and this is quite important, this is a thesis which pertains to the legacy of the Enlightenment, which attempts to assert the unity power of reason, scientific publicity, and of the realm of the liberty for community democracy against the overt shadow of unreason, relativism, and virulent despotism, which is already included in the name of the people, Enlightenment of Clarity or Romanian Illuminism at the Palomino, the life account, right? And at this point, I must also emphasize that more or less we are all like enlightened people, as long as we believe in individual liberties and the fact that people are informed and just like happen to be disinformed. That's what enlightenment is. So long as we believe in it, as a brief mention, the contours of this struggle between enlightenment and its overt shadow, the struggle that we are currently living through, have already been traced 208 years ago by Hegel in the Phenomenology of Spirit, in a famous subchapter entitled Enlightenment, Struggle, and Superstition. As always, as the kid says nowadays, it's in Hegel. So I highly recommend for you to read it. So it's not like, a bit like minor changes, but I won't really elaborate a bit. After this brief context, and especially given the time constraints, I will clearly state the main pieces of my introduction. Although it is certainly onto something, I do not think that post-truth as a concept or diagnosis is adequate enough to describe our current historical predicament, historical moment and political predicament. Perhaps it needs an extra twist, a different nuance, a further turn of the screw, in order to properly make it work. But this extra ingredient I will not be able to provide. Instead, I will only raise some doubt which hopefully will be constructive towards the concerns of our today's time. First of all, the statement "we live in a post-truth age" betrays itself in its very act of enunciation. Insomuch as, by limiting the loss of truth, it attempts to assert the truth. Truly or truthfully, we live in a post-truth age, or it is true that we live in a post-truth age. This age, therefore, seemingly post-truth, allows nevertheless for truth about itself to be stated, for a grand narrative to be asserted. In this regard, it closely echoes one of Jacques Lacan's paradoxes, the liar's paradox. I am lying. Clearly, if I say I am lying, I'm stating the truth. For Lacan, a most potent truth which betrays the subject of the enunciation between the enunciation itself. This is why for Lacan, and it's like very famous opinion, saying truth is constant. It emerges in the fall, disappearance, vanishing of the center of knowledge, and thus it insists, it asserts itself, it enfolds itself. It's a kind of fight. So another quote from Lacan is that we don't get to say anything without at the same time positing that it is true. That's the way it goes. Or, in the words of Hannah Arendt's famous essay on the topic of truth and politics, truth has a despotic character. In our case, its despotic character appears as a statement about loss. In the diagnosis of post-truth, it says that it is true that we lost the world. We know from Hegel that the Enlightenment in its fundamental structure attempts to integrate this loss, struggling with it and against it. Indeed, it can be said that the phenomenology of spirit is about nothing but that, about modernity attempting to cover over, to repress its dark side. This act always resulted in the most catastrophic, tragic, and perhaps comedic outcomes. To quote the passage from the practice of the phenomenology of spirit, spirit has not only lost its sense of life, it is conscious of this loss and of the finitude that is its own content. Turning away from the past and contesting and cursing its sorry state, it now requires from philosophy not so much knowledge of what is, as philosophy is helping establishing once more its substantiality and solidity of being. Or to quote Hegel's most rebellious and perhaps faithful student, Karl Marx, in capitalist modernity, all that is solid melts into air, all that is holy is perfect. So, perhaps to jump rather abruptly, is it not that the figure of the contemporary obscene populist is itself a figure who emerges in the background of these laws and attempts to compensate? To offer, as Hegel suggests, a substantiality and solidity of being, precisely when, as Marx suggests, all that is solid enough to bear. To offer truth precisely when the people demand nothing for that. As Aneka Supanci suggests, followers of conspiracy theories very much believe in truth. They take the category of truth very seriously. It cannot therefore be said that we are living in indifferent or Arabic times, in which people take a safe distance from the truth. Instead, it seems that people are feverishly crazy about it. They want nothing but that, the very naked, pure truth. And there are natural philosophers who are willing to offer this edification on the background of the loss of modernity. Against Hegel's conviction, even warning, that philosophy should not seek to be edifying, but rather it should affirm its loss in the very fact. We could say that such a philosopher is our beloved colleague of Georgescu. He's even written books of art with the following most, it's in the other point. The great Renaissance, truth, liberty, sovereignty is taking the matrix. Or in Romanian, Marea de naștere, adevăr, libertate, suveranitate, etc. Behind the matrix, the deceiving other, if we are to express it in Lacanian parlance, there lies the bare, naked, pure truth. Just as much as we truthfully know that there is someone out there deceiving us, keeping us away from this so much after, this much thought after. So, how does the subject of enunciation, the half-set truth, appear in Georgescu's statement? He says, we don't know what water is, H2O means nothing. Well, isn't there a truth to that? I mean, the chemical formula H2O appeared only in 1811, and surely people were drinking water, bathing themselves before knowing that water is H2O, right? Basically, he's saying, in good old leftist postmodern terms, that water is a social construct. In the same manner as Trump, when he says that the border between Canada and the USA is an artificial line. So this argument can be made on the if we are very simple. I cannot further elaborate on the implications of this, they're quite good, and especially how H2O in Lacanian terms plays a role, and first and foremost, of a signifier, and not of what we normally identify as a brute material reality. Another quote from Georgescu is even more interesting. There exists no war over the border. Have you seen it? Have you seen it with your own eyes? Well, he's once again technically correct. He asserts an empiricist point of view while asserting that the war is no longer simply over there, in a physical reality, if we can put it like that, but it's also over here. It is a hybrid war. We engage in it every time we open our phone, so we don't have to be in trade to see the world. Right? So that's a basic empiricist point. And so basically, Georgescu is half saying Baudrillard's thesis on the Gulf War in the 90s. The Gulf War did not take place. To summarize then, it is not so easy to dismiss Trump or Georgescu as simply telling lies and truth. The extent of their success proves a very crucial point. The fact that regardless of how truthful a truth is, it must emerge the background of a subject of enunciation, of an authority who conveys the truth and evidence. People do not believe in the impersonality of knowledge. This is the idea, the basic idea of enlightenment. Right? The experts, like neoliberal experts, we can put like that, just like transparently convey a very objective piece of knowledge. But in a master who takes upon himself or herself the appearance of the truth, who is willing to say, it is so because I say it, to dot the I on the subject. Of course, Georgescu fails in properly heeding the discourse of the master, is precisely because he fails to heed the message of the Bible that he so very much loves, even though he's not. The truth shall set you free, as Jesus Christ said, but the conspiratorial mindset which is so pervasive today and which founds the new rights discourse fails to accept the fact that this saying also implies that the truth shall set you free from seeking the truth itself. Because they believe that the truth is a thing which can be cut of the net, collected as a souvenir to be put in the palm. The truth is therefore not something that we seek and collect, but a shocking apparition, an instance of the real, an event that finds us in the most accidental, arbitrary, and stupid of circumstances. Truth only emerges in the background of a fall, as is implied already by law. If there is one thing that the conspiratorial mindset cannot accept, it is precisely the lack of reason, the lack of intelligibility, which, in Freudian terms, constitutes a reaction formation, a defense mechanism against the crushing existence of sheer cosmic stupidity and brutal meaninglessness, which perhaps today is more present in our lives than ever in the history of humanity. We can commit a collective suicide via nuclear bombs, via artificial intelligence, via climate change, or why not via Trump-inflicted attack. The conspiratorial mindset therefore needs to believe in a subject who holds the truth, a big other who guarantees that the world is not stupid, and who absolutely knows what's happening, who absolutely knows why a virus which emerges in China can close down the whole planet in the span of a few weeks, who absolutely knows why people are starting wars and killing innocent children under the safe anonymity of drone warfare and artificially imposed starvation, or who absolutely knows why the world is no longer as it used to be in the good old times. However, this paranoia power, as Alan Kansupanchi refers to it, can only assert itself in a time when the subject experiences itself as a waste product of a system which seems to have gained independence from the subject. With AI, the economy seems to work on its own. With COVID, the state seems to work on its own, out of mere lockdowns like the automatic imposition. With climate change, nature seems to work on its own. With social media and artificial intelligence, human creation seems to work on its own. With capitalism, wealth seems to work on its own. This automatization and loss of being therefore necessarily creates the condition for obscene masters who half take this loss of being, their narcissism, paranoia, and psychotic violence but the manifestation of their very cowardice to assert this loss to the very end. As Hegel says, and with this I'm ending, spirit gains its truth only when, in absolute disintegration, it finds it. To tell with this negative is perhaps the true test of thought and political mobilization today. Thank you.
Great. Let's move to Gregor.
So I feel like I should say a few pleasant words before I say anything else, which is that I'm very happy to be in the group. It's my first time in Romania. It's lovely town. The Cluj is so lovely, so I must thank Julian and organizers a lot. And I also have to admit, Leah and I were discussing that we don't really understand Romanian. So while we were here during the festival and tried to listen to as much as we could, we don't know what really was said. So a lot of what we have to say might be repeating things that have already been discussed. So please indulge us. We'll be the stupid Americans who say things once more. And I'll do this by repeating a lot of things, which is even more ridiculous. But it just so happens that it's the case. So let me just go straight to what I prepared for you. Yes, I agree with Dan that post-truth is something that became widely used during the first term of Trump. This term became a huge deal in public discourse during that first mandate because of his fact. Campaign rallies, Trump spread blatant lies. This is basically something that we all know. And all this to jubilant audiences. So this is something that was specifically disconcerting. People liked being obviously liked. This is something that was really striking everyone with complete like we could not grasp it. But I also share Dan's reservations about the term post-truth. Even if it's used in the title of our festival, because this term implies that before the Trumpist era, politics was somehow about truth, at least as understood in the American pragmatist tradition. It suggests that politics once revolved around rational discussion based on facts. This is what Americans really like to emphasize, facts. It suggests that politics once was a place of facts, and which is why fact-checking it briefly became a major concern for some technology-supported social networks. It's no longer, but it used to be. Like for a brief period of time, there was fact-checking, whatever terms. Even more importantly, I think, the general premise, and again, this is something that I already said, general premise of liberal political theory as such, as well as of any parliamentary form of government, is that citizens make their political and economic decisions based on their conscious decision about their rational self-interest. This is why we have parliaments, basically. This premise, I claim, is probably nothing but a liberal. What I mean is that we did not need to wait for Trump to learn that people quite regularly make political decisions that are not in their rational self-interest, economic or otherwise. To give an important example that wasn't already quoted, thank God, there was this philosopher called Benedictus Spinoza, who in the 17th century wrote in his political treatise, but also in his other works, that people are driven in political affairs not by rational deliberation, but by the power of their affects. Moreover, Spinoza argued that truth can never, by its own force, dispel a prejudice. It can only compete with prejudice if it begins to function as a more powerful affect. Spinoza remains and is even rehabilitated today in contemporary social and political theory, precisely because he developed a detailed account of how human affects and emotions, rather than rational reflection, constitute the fabric of social and political life. Now, but even if you claim, as I do, that the political field has never been adequately described as a space for rational discussion based on facts, this does not mean that Trumpism is not a symptom of a radical shift in how political theory works. Liberal political theory has long maintained that the democratic regime depends not only on the checks and balances within the institutional form, but also on democratic education and the reproduction of specific moral values. This is a mantra that we still hear, I think, although less and less. One of the many legacies of the Enlightenment was precisely the ideal of the rational discussion in an educated public, as emphasized by Kant in his essay, What is Enlightenment? Kant argued that educated discourse itself could gradually bring about the beneficial transformation of society and even improve international relations. This is what Kant actually believed. That solely the rational debate can bring about this. We don't need revolutions. We just need to be able to publicly, rationally debate amongst others. This was his belief. And democratic values such as transparency and decision-making, truthfulness in speech, and respect for the rule of law seem to represent the unshakable ideals of democratic societies, such that political actors were at least required to publicly pretend to uphold them. So whatever ultimately drove the political process in liberal democracies, everything happened as if it were the most rational thing to do, given the circumstances. Now, today, especially with the return of Trump, it seems that this pretense itself has been defeated. The word democracy is no longer even used to legitimize whatever the American administration is doing domestically and internationally. I'll give a couple of examples. Trump did not claim, for instance, that Greenland has become part of the United States because he wished to spread democracy. He simply wants Greenland. He needs it. What about the rule of law? In a recent address to hundreds of US generals and admirals, the self-styled Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, explicitly called for making decisions without regard for legal constraints. He called it TP legality. He wants lethality, not TP legality. Now, let us recall that the world did not always look like this. Specifically, the United States did not always look like this. Back in 2004, when it came to light that the US Army had repeatedly engaged in torture and abuse of prisoners in Iraq's Abu Ghraib prison, the US establishment was caught off guard. When it became clear that the United States was systematically torturing prisoners in its extraterritorial military compound in Guantanamo Bay on Cuba, going back to 2001 and continuing still, the government felt compelled to publicly deny it. We are not torturing people. This was a big thing that they were saying publicly. This was their most important message. To think, they even invented the term enhanced interrogation techniques, precisely to maintain the pretense, the facade, that they were not torturing. So I argue that this gradual abandonment of all pretense to a democratic legal process of government and in international relations is the one massive change that has unfolded over the past decade, although I do not claim that it is the only one. I'll just conclude and argue that to properly understand the transformation of the political sphere we are witnessing today, we must first of all acknowledge that it has always been dominated by emotions, not by rational discussion, based on facts. Put differently, the political discourse has always been overdetermined or ideological. Following Marx and Foucault rather than Plato, the actual claims, I'm just throwing names. Following Marx and Foucault rather than Plato, my claim is that the question of how things appear to us, how they take a concrete shape in our shared imaginary, is internal to political power. This is why it is impossible to solve the problem of modern parliamentary democracies simply by morally bashing theatrics or merely by appealing to truthfulness, sincerity, and transparency in the public sphere. Put differently, truth can only function in the political realm insofar as it appears on theatrical plane itself, or on the plane of appearance. I'm coming back to Spinoza. One thing that maybe has discussed a lot or enough in our context. So it is not politically effective to fact check completely outlandish claims made by contemporary authoritarians. Just as one will never convince anti-vaxxers that vaccines do not cause autism by pointing out that no serious scientific study ever confirms it. It is just ineffective to not do it. You know, this is what Spinoza specifically says. Truth cannot dispel prejudice by its own force. What has changed in recent years is that the very way in which power appears. So what we're witnessing is a change in the layer of appearance itself, the imaginary itself. And the way the pretenses to democratic ideals have been dropped is part of this shift. So instead of nuda vanitas, naked truth, we have naked emperors. We have them flaunting their complete inadequacy, authoritarianism and so on. So I'm gonna quote Dan again in the end by saying that the term that he used towards the end of his presentation was obscenity of this new masters, of this new authoritarians. And obscenity is precisely what I think this nakedness of the would-be authoritarian reveals. To drop one more name, and the last one is Yuval Kremnitzer, who has this book called Emperor's New Nudity. And this is, I think, precisely one of the points that he's developing in this book. The point about how contemporary masters are, just flaunting their own failures and their own nakedness. Well, thank you very much.
Have here layer. This works too. This is the same. Perfect.
So I want to also thank the organizers for having me at this event. I'm very happy to be here and be part of this very important discussion. So I think that one of the most significant challenges facing to contemporary societies regarding post-truth are conspiracy theories. So today I want to talk about conspiracy theories. But before I dive into that discussion, I want to say a few words about the initial introduction and the question, what is post-truth itself? I think there is a very simple definition that I believe it gets the core of the problem, and that is the definition posed by Oxford Dictionary. An Oxford Dictionary defines post-truth as the circumstances in which objective facts are less influential for shaping public opinion than they appeal to emotions or belief. So objective facts are less important than people's emotion, like what they believe it's true or what they feel like it's true. And the prefix post in post-truth does not mean there is the end of truth. Like the prefix in post-war, like post-war means the period after the war. The post-war, post-truth means that we have plurality of truth, and some of them are like scientific truth based on science, and some of them are purely subjective. And I also don't agree that post-truth is about lying. Especially in the example of conspiracy theories, there is a moment of self-deception. People actually believe sincerely what they are saying. They believe in the truth. What is different is that their truth, it's not falsifiable. You cannot prove them wrong. You cannot argue with conspiracy theories. For instance, like the truth in science is falsifiable. We have what Althusser calls epistemological shifts. You have the concept of gravity used to be defined as a force that pulls objects together, and now it's defined as the bending of space and time. So there was a epistemological shift, it was proven wrong, and it grew from that. In conspiracy theories, you cannot do that, because every argument against conspiracy theory, they use it as a proof for a cover-up or something like that. So if we take a look at the example of Pizzagate conspiracy theory, that was Pizzagate conspiracy theory believed that high-ranking officials of Democratic Party are running a sex child trafficking ring in the basement of pizzeria in Washington, D.C. And even though everyone said that's not true, even though the pizzeria doesn't even have a basement, this like idea spread through American public because it appealed to people's outrage about child sex trafficking. And when fact checkers proved that this is wrong, they said, no, 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 you're just trying to cover it up. So another thing I want to point out is the relationship of post-truths towards the facts, or like conspiracy theories towards the facts. Like you have extreme conspiracy theories that simply deny science and simply say facts are not legit. For instance, flat Earth theory. Flat Earth theory simply denies science. But the majority of conspiracy theories, they don't deny facts or scientists, but what they are doing is cherry picking the facts in a way that affirm their political or ideological worldview. For instance, climate change deniers, they don't say like science is like wrong altogether, but what they are doing is like selecting a few articles that prove that the temperature did not rise above a certain level in the last 20th century. And this is a very important point because I think it also shows that post-truth or conspiracy theories are not only cultural phenomena, but they are like political tool. And the political tool that in the sense that the conspiracy theories can be weaponized by the right-wing party. For instance, Donald Trump weaponized cultural Marxism as a conspiracy theory in 2016. Cultural Marxism as a conspiracy theory believes that after the fall of Soviet Union, the Marxists are not trying to change the basic social structure anymore, like economy, but they are trying to infiltrate the culture by infiltrating media apparatuses, high schools, faculties, and stuff like that. And then in 2020, and in the last elections, he weaponized QAnon conspiracy theories. So this conspiracy theory that's like offspring of Pizzagate conspiracy theory, because they also believe that there is like a child sex trafficking ring run by Satan-worshipping, cannibalistic Democratic Party members. So yeah, and then I want to address like why did the conspiracy theories emerge? Because and I think if you pose this question, we have at least two different kinds of answers. One of the answers was posed by authors like Richard Hofstadter and Karl Popper, who believe that conspiracy theories are something irrational. They are like leftovers of religious beliefs. And then you have a functionalist approach. I would say it's functionalist approach because it asks not why, not if conspiracy theories are bad or good, but what function do they play in society. And I think, in this approach, I think there is like a very good quote from Friedrich Jameson, who argued that conspiracy theories are poor persons' cognitive mapping in postmodern age. So cognitive mapping, and what this means is that like the contemporary world is so fast changing, so globalized, so uncertain, so complex, and the people can't really understand it and grasp it. So they're trying to situate themselves in this world. And when cognitive mapping fails, conspiracy theories emerge. Because what is interesting is that conspiracy theories often come so close to the truth, like so close, like there really are elites running the global system. There really is the distinction between 1% and 99%. There is like political opacity, corporate power, big pharma interests, like all of that is true, but they are explaining that by scapegoating, by saying, no, it's the Jews, or it's the Illuminati, it's the Cabal. And then the last thing I want to say is like conspiracy theories have always existed. They are not something new. They are as old as humanity. But what is dangerous in contemporary time is that they can merge with authoritarian regime. For instance, Hannah Arendt argued that the ideal subject of totalitarian regime is not a convinced Nazi or a convinced communist, but a person who cannot distinguish between truth and fiction, between what is true and what is false. So what she's arguing is that, like, what leads to authoritarianism, it's not a political conviction, like I'm a true Nazi or a true communist, but an epistemological disorientation. So people who cannot have a shared values anymore, or a shared system of values in which they could orient themselves. So this is for the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we will now go online with Mihaela, if she hears us.
Do you hear me well?
Hello. Yeah.
Hello,
Great.
You hear me, yes?
Yes.
Okay, good. Sorry, I don't hear very well. Thank you so much for inviting me. I am honored to be here with you all. I greatly enjoyed all the interventions so far. I'm a bit of an interloper in this room, and I feel I'm trespassing a little bit into philosophy. So what I'm about to say will be informed more by critical theory and psychology, to offer a more pedestrian, if you will, grounded analysis of the context in which conspiracy theory thrive and where heroic leaders who promise simple solutions become appealing. Before I continue, can I ask that you maybe turn off the microphone of the computer that I'm connected to in that room, because I hear myself twice.
The Wi-Fi. Try again.
Yeah, that's okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'll continue. Yes. Did you hear everything I said so far? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you so much for the invitation. As I said, I'm not a specialist on post-truth, and I think I was invited here alongside my co-author, Camil Ungureanu, because we're writing a book on the current rise of far right in Romania. And what I'm about to say will build a bit on that project, but also think through some of the implications of what it means to observe these processes happening in a democracy. So what are the preconditions for a democracy's functioning and flourishing, and how problems with democracy's material, ideational, and affective underpinnings provide a fertile ground for conspiracy theory and for salvationist leaders who peddle all sorts of simple explanations and simple solutions. And the focus here is, of course, on simple, and I very much acknowledge what's been said before about conspiracy theories, explanatory and kind of simplifying explanations. Now, as you can see from what I have just said in outlining democracy's material, ideational, and affective dimension, I was never under the illusion that democracy was ever a regime of rationality, and I am somewhat upset that the Oxford Dictionary definition reproduces a very problematic opposition of reason and emotion that does not, of course, stand scrutiny, because reason, just as much as emotion, can be either democratic or undemocratic, and there's nothing inherently undemocratic or undangerous about emotion, just as there's nothing inherently democratic or emancipatory about reason. So the focus is on this on material, ideational, and affective emotional roots of conspiracy theory and of salvationist leadership. So now, in terms of the material base, of course, what we're witnessing is that these conspiracies and salvationists very much flourish within contexts that are characterized by growing economic polarization, flexibilization of labor and generalized precarity. And this is paralleled by the demise of the welfare state to the extent that it ever fully existed, and the erosion of social protections and the provision of free education, among many other things. We've witnessed, of course, over the last few decades, ongoing changes in the structure of labor, with automatization, with the growing global division of labor between the global north and the global south. And now we are going through the rise of the AI, which is already causing a great deal of concern regarding the massive reskilling that the so-called AI transition will involve, with unevenly distributed privileges and burdens, but of course also with great risks being posed to the quality of deliberative processes. Now, these material transformations in the global economy and their nefarious effect on individual well-being and the great polarization it gives rise to is ideationally attached to a discourse about the individualization of responsibility for one's success or failure. We have all heard of the entrepreneurial self, and this comes also attached with the rise of positive psychology as a discipline and as a discourse. We all know about the American "you can do it if you really want it," and the corollary, of course, is that if you failed, it's all your fault and you have to bear responsibility for becoming a loser in the economic capitalist game. And this, of course, again, is coupled with the stigmatization of poverty and the whole discourse we witness today about the fat, bloated carcass of the state and the assisted many, which, of course, does not stand numerical scrutiny given the gradual historical erosion of the welfare state around the world, and in particular in Romania's case. And this is one of the things that greatly concern us. Both Camille and I are very much concerned about the ways in which this discourse about, the big state and the need to slim down the state displaces the discontent caused by Romania's integration into global chains of production and exchange onto the plane of the moral. So we have a moralization of what is an economic and political issue. And instead of talking about the effects on a flat tax, on the well-being of the population or the lack of reinvestment of profits back into the economy, we speak about corruption and the moral vices of the assisted, the welfare queens and kings of Romania, who need to be sacrificed in the name of progress and Europeanization. So we have this coupling of material transformations that causes a lot of social suffering, a lot of disproportionate shouldering of economic burdens by the many who are the losers of the capitalist game. And this happens simultaneously in a political context that's characterized by the convergence of the center left and the center right. And we have many political scientists have talked about the ways in which the convergence of the center left and the center right makes the extremist parties much more attractive as meaningful alternatives to what has become a flattened center. And in Romania, of course, because we are in the context of Romania, we have seen over the last few decades the Social Democrats as the main leftist party contributing directly to the weakening of social protections. And we have seen no political party truly represent the losers of the capitalist transition. And in the sense, we can talk to a great extent in Romania, but not just in Romania, about basically a crisis of political representation. And this is also, of course, very much pushed by the failure of the left in Romania, but also elsewhere, which gradually fuels the appeal of these extremist forces who step in and promise to finally give voice to the silent majority, to the left behind, to the moral people left behind by the corrupt elite. And I'm sure that these are tropes very common to you from your consumption of media from Romania, but also from Europe and the United States. But of course, this is not all there is to the ideological landscape that makes conspiracy and salvationism appropriate and attractive. What we need, and this is what I've argued in our book and what I firmly believe in, is that we need historically and sociologically rigorous analysis for each and every context in order to figure out why certain globally common conspiracies and ideas of authoritarian leadership stick locally? Why do they gather support, and why do they get uptake in local contexts? And we need to look at how local traditions and histories of conspiracism, of religion, of alternative spiritualities, of extremist ideologies, and their scapegoating mechanisms work locally, have worked locally, and how there is a happy meeting between globally exported conspiracies and local traditions of flirting with such discourses. Because, of course, while many of us are plugged through social media, through global communications, to the American cultural hegemon, to its ideological production of frames of reference, and we've talked a lot about Trump today, what we are witnessing is not merely a globalization of Western populist conspiracies, far-right politics. I think this is a very reductive explanation that has been peddled by many prominent political scientists. It's what we are witnessing for them is basically an import of a lot of Western ideas and Western political tropes and discourses into the East, for example. I think that this is a very reductive explanation that neglects, first, the role of other regional powers and their campaigns of disinformation and shaping of public opinion. And actually, in the case of Romania and Moldavia, investigative journalists have done a much better job than the secret services at tracing Russian money and Russian campaigns on social media and their impact on Romanians and Moldavians' receptivity to alternative medicine, to alternative spiritualities, campaigns that have made this for the anti-vaxxers in this world and the salvationists, guru-like candidates who are powered directly by the planet's energies and can say health and lead us to salvation by taking a quick bath in a frozen lake. And you know very well who I'm referring to. It's also important to look historically and sociologically at the role of local religious beliefs that are often mixed with a variety of other elements. For example, mysticism is very important. We need to pay attention to the relationship between the state and the church and the history of activity to alternative spirituality and science fiction, among other things, but also to local patriarchal traditions of messianic leadership and local traditions of what has been called conspirituality, a mixture of conspiracy theory and spirituality. And there is a book that I recently came across, and I want to recommend to anyone who has an interest in conspirituality, spirituality, and how it feeds into current processes, political processes. There's a new book by Joseph Kellner about Soviet scientists, Soviet atheist scientists, and the appeal of non-Christian religions and science fiction before the end of the USSR and in the turbulent 1990s. And this shows how the fertile ground for the reception of new conspiracisms and new spiritualities that lead to a phenomenon like anti-vaxxerism or, again, all the other conspiracies that buttress far-right forces, how they have contributed to their uptake and their success. There's a bit of work done in Romania about the appeal of mystical and alternative spiritualities under communism and also afterwards, but I think more needs to be done to unpack Romania's attraction to various forms of traditions that fuel anti-intellectualism and skepticism towards science, right? And of course, we can talk a lot about poor scientific literacy at the same time, but I think it's important to trace back the kinds of ideological, religious, and spiritual traditions that the new conspiracism and the new far right plugs into. Last but not least, I want to talk a little bit about the dispositional and the affective dimensions of democracy. And my predecessors have already talked about the need for orientation and simple explanation in a world characterized by high complexity, economic uncertainty, and the pace of change. And this, of course, these processes require some psychological probing, which is what, of course, conspiracism offers. I also think, as a critical theorist, that the issue of alienation needs mentioning. And in my work, I am in conversation with Harmut Rosa, who I think has offered one of the most important analyses of the affective climate of late capitalist society. And the idea for Rosa is that late capitalism enshrines an instrumentalist logic of making the world more available, more accessible, more attainable through scientific, technological, legal, and economic mastery. And of course, according to this accumulative logic of mastery in relation to the environment, the others, a good life requires getting more and more and more and more. And in a way that traps individuals in this logic of competition and of alienation. This leads to alienation from other human beings, from the environment, from sources of meaning that do not presuppose this accumulative logic, but also from politics, right? And it is in this context of general complex alienation that these kind of beliefs, these kind of conspiracies get a lot of traction. In terms of the other sources, effective sources for the appeal of conspiracisms and messianic leadership, scholars have also talked about white and male grievance regarding the relative gains of women, racial and sexual minorities, especially in the context of the United States. But I think that it is very important that, again, we resist this seamless translation of findings related to the Anglo-Saxon world into countries like Romania. Nonetheless, I do think that Romania needs to take a very hard look at itself and figure out what kind of gender structures and what kind of gender traditions exist in Romania that favor the popularity of manly men like Simeon or Georgescu. And what are the institutional weaknesses and the cultural factors that lead people like the hyper-toxic Tate brothers to decide that Romania was good as their playground. This is very important, and I think that we need to have a multi-level analysis of the effective atmospheres in which these conspiracies and the attraction of these many messianic solutionist leaders begin to gain ground. The last thing I want to talk about is a question that Camille and I have many discussions about, and I'm more attracted to this idea than he is, and he can speak for himself. This concept of geopolitical resentment. And this concept has been coined, and I'm trying to work on it, and with Camille we try to kind of repurpose it for making sense of the experience of places that do not really matter in the global economy, or that have become sacrifice zones within the global capitalist economy. And this is the concept of geopolitical resentment. Now, it is uncontestably the case that in post-socialist Romania, we see that the country has become a space of extraction of cheap labor and of cheap resources for the global economy. And this is documented very well by well-reputed economists. I'm not talking about, the whole colony trope that emerges in far-right discourses. And these economists have shown with figures and solid evidence the social and economic costs of Romania's transition to a capitalist society. And in particular, it's important to think about the geopolitical resentment of such countries and of the experience of the diaspora, which has actually in the Romanian case historically voted very much against the corrupt social democrats and always in favor of pro-European liberal forces. So what led to their shift? What led them to their turn towards the far right? And this is important to think through along these material, educational, and effective levels, because it will help us also dispel all this language of, these idiots who live abroad, uneducated, go back to your, strawberry fields and don't come back and tell us how to run Romania. There is this kind of demonization of diaspora that has happened very much in the Romanian public space, and that has blamed the rise of these figures like Georgescu and Simeon on the lack of education and irresponsibility of the diaspora. And as I said, they have historically voted liberal. Why did they change? Well, there's first of all the problem of a lack of representation at home and the lack of political concern for the growing numbers of economic migrants, lack of concern for the demographic crisis that this massive migration has brought about, to say nothing of a lack of political attention to the emotional costs of emigration, to the tragedy of the split families and the social suffering that it has caused. This has been compounded by humiliations of economic migrants in the Western world. I live in the UK. I can only remember how just before Brexit happened, there was an anti-Romanian, anti-Bulgarian campaign with "the Romanians are coming!" 3 exclamation marks. We were the dangers that was going to sink the country. Whereas during the pandemic, where everybody was shielding at home and was doing social distance, the front page of the same tabloid was "the Romanians are here to save us," referring to the agreement that the Romanian government made with several Western governments to schlep poor Romanians to the farms and to the factories of Germany, of the Netherlands, of the UK, to make sure that people had enough food while they were sheltering in the comfort and security of their home. So it is this kind of experiences, this kind of humiliation, this kind of vulnerability to unsafe work condition, the insecurity of labor, and also the discrimination and racism that they have encountered in the West, compounded by the neglect of the political decision makers in Romania, that have made the diaspora turn. The last thing I want to say is, of course, that it's only the Simeons and Georgescus of this world who actually campaigned externally in the diaspora, leading to their rise in popularity within that sector of the Romanian population. I know this has been very depressing, but I want to close by saying that democracy, to cite actually Cheryl Hall, I have a quote here: democracy is not an end state to be achieved. It's an ongoing practice to be followed. And the passion for democracy, so democracy is a space of passions, is a commitment to continue working together, engaging, collaborating, and refusing to resort to force, even when challenged by disagreement. And I think this kind of definition can serve as a standard by which to think about the ways in which we can turn a critical eye to what we, inverted commas, have been doing wrongly, and think again how we can approximate this definition of democracy in our practices, resisting those who claim to give us final and ultimate solutions. And I think I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
I don't know if you hear me. So you do. Okay, great. So next up, Camille Gureanu. If you could keep it within 10 minutes, that would be really appreciated in order to have some questions from the audience as well.
The micro is cut.
Yeah.
Open.
Spune
se deschide. Open the microphone.
Camille, just open the microphone again.
Now it works, the micro?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, wonderful.
Yes.
I never use this. I'm very afraid of technology, so hopefully it works. So thanks a lot for the invitation. I would love, and it's not just politeness, to be included with you. But family duties unfortunately keep me here in Barcelona. Thanks a lot for the invitation, for organization, for the whole organization of the event, and for the talks. I mean, I'm in much agreement with what has been said. Like all of you covered a lot of ground. My intervention will be a little bit more modest. I'll start with a sort of optimistic note in reflection on the question of the truth as a reaction to what has been said, and then I'll get more depressing, speaking about the question of the public sphere and the transformation of the public sphere within the European context, having in mind also what has been going on in Romania and maybe in recent times. And what people speak about in terms of militant democracy. So the question of a few reflection on the question of the truth and post-truth. I would definitely agree, to start a bit of a discussion with Gregory, is the fact that if you are to understand this dichotomy as a sort of historical dichotomy that falls into, let's say, this a certain liberal narrative, would be just mistaken. I mean, this is not really sustainable. But I still think that the question of post-truth maybe can be rescued as a sort of, on the basis of a reflection of radical erosion of truth in current politics, and not only in general in society, right? It is true that this erosion, and here I would go back to the reflection, Indiana's reflection on conspiracy theories. I hope I get the name right. It is driven by, to speak in Spinozian terms, a desire for truth, not only for truth, and truthfulness as well. And that's, let's say, in some sense, the optimistic notes. Even if you think of the question of the unity of the new power, of this idea of the emperor new clothes, right, that was invoked by Gregor, this is also advanced or put forward in the name of one, not so much maybe democracy, but one, depending on context, but one is truth and truthfulness as well. You know, these are really important. Keep in mind that, for instance, Trump's platform is called Truth Social. So this bow, as it were, of the autocrats to the question of truth and truthfulness, I think is relevant. They should be reflected on in relation to maybe more hopefulness or possible hope concerning reorienting things. So truth remains fundamentally important in this post-truth reality, let's say, that we are living, right? So to explain that, I think we should go back to, I think this is the spirit of Mihaela's talk, to what I would call the social, economic condition of the constitution of truth regimes, right? We should really inscribe our reflection within a broader reflection on, let's say, late capitalist society to understand this erosion of the truth, right? And here we note a few paradoxes, a few ironies, if you want. If you think of the question of the constitution of truth at the level of public sphere, the first one is that the public sphere has been characterized by more inclusion, but less inclusiveness. So more inclusion in the sense that through the platformization of the public sphere, basically TikTok, YouTube have been spread globally, but these platforms are controlled, and the rules of the communication are controlled for a limited number of people who are specifically located in Silicon Valley and so on, right? So there is a tension here, a paradox. So more inclusion, a global expansion, and less inclusiveness. The second tension, if you will, is related to the first and has to do with the conditions, with the very material conditions of the constitution of the regimes of truth, is that the increased accessibility and transparency seems to be provided by this platformization of the public sphere has been accompanied by more opaqueness, right? And the opaqueness is obviously related to not only to the control of the people, but also to the algorithmization of the public sphere, right? So, and the third element, the third tension of paradox is that more realist the representations are becoming. For instance, the produced videos by the artificial intelligence, less realism is out there, right? It's again a structural tension that is going to evolve and become, let's say, ever more dramatic, and it will further, I think, erode the conditions of the production of the truth, right? So these three, let's say, paradoxes or tensions inscribed in the constitution of the public sphere in relation to the to the way we communicate, the way we experience things, affect deeply and deeply erode the question of truth making in the public sphere, right? Which I think is fundamental. To invoke somebody that maybe was in the back of the mind of Gregor's intervention, Habermas, with his belief in a rational discussion. Habermas might have been wrong about a good many things, but I think his key obsession was right, was spot on, namely that if we sever the connection between democracy and truth-making, right? Indeed, we need a different, more nuanced, more dialectical understanding of truth in relation to rhetoric, emotions, questions of power, desire, and so on. We are lost. We are within the autocratic domain. So I think that key insight is really fundamental. Now, in reaction to this, what has been done? Now, one of the reactions is to appeal to what I call the mechanisms of militant democracy, right? Political interventions, legal interventions to actually mitigate disinformation, exclude, in some cases, people or parties from the electoral arena, as it happened in Romania. It happened more recently in Moldavia, right? So I do think that some of the instruments are necessary. Romania is a very complex and murky case. Maybe Moldavia is a little bit of a better case, although there was improvisation in the case of Moldavia as well. To give an example, the president founded an agencies to counteract disinformation in September. It was very, very late, and which was very effective, however, in closing certain sites that some certain bot networks, that were corrupting, let's say, the public communication just before the elections, right? So I think these measures are necessary, are very difficult to take, precisely because the speed of producing bot networks is very, very different. The pace is very different from the speed of or the rhythm of the interventions. It is very easy, especially when you have experience, to produce these bot networks, and it's more difficult to actually plot them into and to disarticulate them. So they have a temporality problem and some structural problems in order to deal with this. However, I think this is one of the elements that they can contribute to fighting this deep erosion of the post-truth. What is going on in Europe? Well, we have the Digital Services Act from 2022, which is important in counteract systemic disinformation, some conspiracies as well that Mihaela was referring to. However, the tendency now in Europe, and this I closed, is really to go the American way. Remember that Vance came to Munich and lectured Europe about the erosion of the freedom of speech. And if you look at what is going on in Europe right now, for instance, the Commission, with the entrance of different far-right forces, and with the predominance of the historical unprecedented dominance of the center-right, far-right forces in the Commission, and the Commission is made of 27 also, only four or five with doubts, include Romania here, so there are doubts about the social democratic pedigree and the willingness actually to to go for more regulation in order to fight, at least partially, within the limits of the possible, disinformation. So the trend is really not towards tackling this phenomenon really on the basis of the Romanian experience, also the Moldavian experience, but rather towards liberalization, unfortunately, in the Vance Trump direction, catering to the interests of the platform. So I end here with this, let's say, pessimistic note. However, I alluded to the fact that truth remains fundamentally important, even for those who systematically undermine it, even for conspiracy theorists. I mean, the drive here, the desire is actually to get to some truth. You know, the Călin Georgescu promises truth and truthfulness, not only in politics, but also a sort of existential truth that is meant to overcome our alienation that Mihaela was referring to, right? So any possibility to redirect this desire should go through creative democratic politics. The signs that there is for real reaction in different parts that are more or less democratic of the world are really scarce, but hope, I think, should be preserved as a sort of duty, if you will. Thank you.
Thank you, Călin. Now I think we have time for one or two questions or comments from you. I think we have a microphone there. Emmanuel, can you take your message?
Just open it.
Anyway, let's respect my voice is too strong, doesn't need the support.
No.
Can you hear me or like
Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, I would begin just to say that I will make a small comment so as to make a short resume of what said in the beginning, namely that basically distance itself is not so valuable in this context. And in this context, the most important the experience of distance, or how people would put it, N plus one defilement, something that we must experience. For that, what is epitomized in this context was, from my point of view, Boris Groys's text on the COVID pandemic. And when Boris Groys said that we are just making a very critical discussion about nothing, because all the solutions to the COVID and the pandemic conspiracy theory was already present in Plato. And how is that? Boris Groys has a fantastic work on it and says that even the idea of lunging at the truth, having desire for truth, if you do that, you're already in the sophistical. What we write that, so this has very simple facts. By getting this metaphor of being present with the truth is not something beyond, so it does not be centralized, it's something within. And as soon as you see that, in that moment, the sophist does not, it's irrepressible force being pulled to have a solution to someone disappears. For that, what is going back concludes, and that's a very incredible idea, I find it illuminating in the context of Plato, that post-truth in this discussion, when you have a desire for truth, you're already lost, you're already with the sophisticated. Why is that so important? Because you see that if I go as a citizen of Athens and I see what in all the places it's attacked by sophists. The only solutions that work here is to see that any individual position is from the beginning something to do with physiological, I just want desire for something. The philosophical solution is to not have any individual position whatsoever.
And this context of not having any individual position whatsoever as philosophy comes Hegel and says that the only thing that binds us as human modernity is an opacity. And this, how can I say, this experience of dissidence is fundamental from a modern point of view. Basically, I would say that even go so far to say that absolute knowing in Hegel is nothing that expressing this vivid dissident experience. So that's my last point. How can we do that when judging him in a functionalist, pragmatical way of view? I would go with an example from a good friend of mine who teaches at another university. And how did he translate or went from a purely return to facts, which is not presented, but going to the experience of the dissonance? He puts on 5 texts of French theory, Deleuze, Paul, and he didn't write the name of the authors. And he asked the students, who wrote this text? They were pretty fundamental texts, Deleuze, Paul. All the students answered Deleuze. There was not even one text. Everything that had a French thing was from the beginning. So
But
we do not need to go there to say they're wrong.
he wrote even the Bible. He wrote even the Bible.
Yes. And the
Ancient Bible.
last thing. Yeah. And the last thing, just to conclude with the austerity of the desiring for truth, not having the truth within, was when Donald J. Trump was in front of an ecstatic crowd in 2016 in California. And he said that was his moment when he can experience the dissidence. He said that, and as a conclusion, he said that, Mr. President, you will call us, that was Trump saying, and said, Mr. President, please stop winning. We are winning too much. We cannot take it anymore. And the question of experience of dissidence in this context is not that we are winning, but who is winning and how is it winning? How is it? And that is really the most important thing. That's why I think that this text from Roy going beyond has a lot to say about conspiracy theories. Thank you. That's all.
There was a comment.
Do you have a question?
I have a question for you. 2 or 3. Even anything.
Only one. Okay.
I mean, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Maybe you could
Right now, can you hear me? I mean,
No, I give you.
I think my profit is just can be finished.
okay.
I hear very poorly, sorry.
Yeah, it works too.
Can you? Okay. Can you hear me now?
Let's try.
Okay. Thank you so much for this conversation, and congratulations for organizing this amazing and very urgent philosophy festival, I think. And thank you to all speakers. It's been genuinely refreshing to hear so many perspectives. I'd like to provoke you with some paradoxical questions about what is to be leftist today, how left is perceived globally, and here's the question that been bothering me lately. How do you respond to the new right-wing talking point that the left has become a conspiracy theory? You know the line that Marxists and post-Marx are basically just because you can't stand the idea that someone else got rich. Oriana Tatapievich even says it openly. Class theory for him is just envy with better footnotes. So I'm wondering, can we still be the left synthesis that doesn't sound like conspiracy theory? Or maybe the more interesting move is to admit that it does sound like one. Because in some sense, the system is conspiring. Think of characters like Diana Ivanovic Shoshova, who declares herself anti-Christian and pro-Palestinian, but only out of old-fashioned anti-Semitism, or all those populist voices saying that lies are robbing the people. And then there is a broader question. How do we explain the collapse of trust in the technocratic government of post-socialist countries? Those Enlightenment-style managers of truth who turn out to be the PR department of big capital. And the last one, can you comment more on the huge impact of social platforms in shaping our post-truth society? Can we imagine a post-truth society without a post-industrial society? Can we also find the resolution of the social problem through social media? Thank you.
That's one more panel, you know.
I can start.
We don't have any more time, but we can sketch some replies to the myriad of questions that Emmanuel kindly asked.
Well, I will just reply to the first question, like how to be lefty today, or like how to fight the conspiracy theories from the left perspective. I mean, also the left wing has conspiracy theories, not only the right wing, but in contemporary society, conspiracy theories are weaponized by the right wing party. So that gives you the idea that only right wings are conspiracies. But the main question is how to fight them, because arguing doesn't work. Appeals to emotion doesn't work. So I think like the only way to fight them is like to rebuild. It's like the same as the fight against neoliberalism or capitalism itself. And I have this somewhere in my notes. I have 3 points. So I think the first very important thing is to rebuild collective infrastructure for knowledge. So this means like public media, community education, like collective infrastructure of knowledge. Then democratization of the means of information production. Like today, like everyone produces information, but not everyone owns the information. Small corporations own our information. So there is like a very important question: who produces and who owns the information? How the algorithms to capture your attention work, and we have to fight against those algorithms. We have to rebuild like community archives. So it's like cooperative platforms and stuff like that. And the last thing is like political education in a sense that that builds like class consciousness in the people, that gives them like correct cognitive mapping, because I was mentioning Friedrich Jameson. So it gives them like the idea of how to situate themselves in the world, how understand the complex financializing system, how to situate themselves. So I think like the fight against conspiracy theories as the leftist is like basically this. It's like about prevention, because once people believe in it, you cannot really argue with them. And prevention is community infrastructure.
I wonder whether Michaela or Camille want to chip in on this question, or should I go ahead for it? And maybe okay. So I won't get too long. Maybe like short questions that folks over. I think that there's one uncomfortable question and one more comfortable question. I'll start with the uncomfortable one. I think that there's a lot of like leftist parties, you can say, or mode of thinking nowadays, which inadvertently kind of falls into the right-wing type of post-territorial type of thing. Right? If I say, for instance, that there's Elon Musk and Neuralink and Zuckerberg that have a conspiracy against humanity, that's a true conspiracy, that's an important conspiracy. How do you get that to people? And I think that here I really appreciated communist intervention, because I was actually relieved because I didn't get to talk about my normal philosophy. I think what Camille said about the fact that basically you have 4 or 5 people who control the whole public sphere, that's outrageous. That's just like literally outrageous. You couldn't have imagined that like 15 or 20 years ago that basically have the whole digital sphere controlled by a number of people. That's not a conspiracy, but maybe in order to get to the people, you need to make it seem as if it's a conspiracy, to be kind of very, and also portray it in 10 seconds or 50 seconds for real, to actually make maybe do some push-ups while say something about Zuckerberg. I don't know, right? But the third one is the fact that, again, like this more like rational type of conspiracy, the problem is like when the left says that, for instance, like, okay, the Ukraine war is one way in which capital reproduces itself. The pandemic is one way in which capital reproduces itself. Trump is just one way of like which capitalism reproduces itself.
That's true.
And it's
The last one is true.
yes, it is, but it's a certain type of new capitalism,
Yes.
capitalist who says that the stock market is communist. How does that happen? Why does he say that the stock market is filled with communists? There's like some little shift in the way in which like capitalism reproduces itself indeed, but there's the way in which the left like presupposes the fact that capital is a kind of like an individual with agency, in a specific way, right? So there's like a saying from a leftist like group who say that capitalism wants you to be stupid. Capitalism makes you stupid. Like it doesn't want you to be stupid. Like capitalism is not like an agent who like pulls the things. So it's far more contradictory. It has like a lot of, because otherwise we fall into the same kind of fantasy of the big other, in which like there are people who actually know what they're doing, but they're just as stupid while being at the same time precisely because they're stupid, like inquisitive people, right? So I think that there's one way in which, in terms of like leftist strategies, want to put it like that, to distinguish between good type of conspiracies and bad type of conspiracies, because they are true. Yes, that was my opinion.
So thank you for your questions and for the interaction. This session has come to an end. Thank you all and have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Enjoy the goodies. Philosophical and
Thank you.
culinary goodies. Thank you for the organizers. Ciao, ciao.